Chapter 26 Shadow Arrives and Kittens. Spoilers. Although I never expected to pass along word of this unconventional job opportunity, I did find myself looking for Shadow. I circled the park 3 or 4 times a day. In the afternoon, I sat over coffee at various shops on Clement Street. Once I heard some young girls at the next table talking about how they hadn't seen that actor guy in a while, but that's the closest I came to another encounter. I might have known that when he came again, it would be in the same, almost dreamlike way. I'd been reading in bed for almost an hour when I put aside my book and an empty teacup and turned out the light. I remember thinking, as I often did in those empty days, that it would be nice if Delilah would join me. But she had grown quite awesomely pregnant and couldn't make the leap to the mattress. Shadow's veterinarian said everything was proceeding normally, but I found myself wondering if cats were birthed a dozen at a time. I sighed and adjusted the pillows, tugging the quilt higher on my arms and waiting for sleep. I suppose I was too obviously watching for it. I often tried to experience that boundary moment between awake and sleep, but it resists capture. In any case, I'm quite sure I hadn't crossed the border when I felt the new weight on the mattress. Delilah? I called, but the weight was growing, and the smell of him was in my nose. Shadow? I'm here, that familiar voice said, and I turned into his embrace. I have no words to describe the night that followed. We needed no words, not in those first dark hours of reunion, though words would come. Our hands were our eyes, finding familiar places, reassuring us that nothing was changed. I suppose I cried. I know I felt Shadow's tears on my chest. But we also laughed. Goodness, we laughed so loud I'm surprised the neighbors didn't complain. The space between the blinds was growing light when we finally slept. I remember feeling sleep come over me like a soft blanket, and in that boundary moment, I realized my head on his chest, that I heard no heartbeat. When I imagined our reunion, rewinding the plan to make every detail perfect, I woke to the sound of the shower. I slipped from my bed and found a beautiful brocade kimono waiting to cover me. The kettle was already on the stove, and I had just enough time to fill the tea ball and find the pot before it whistled. As the fragrant steam warmed my face, I felt his arms come around my waist, felt his lips, his teeth on my neck. I made scones, and we ate them with homemade jam and clotted cream that by some miracle appeared in the refrigerator. We looked onto the park and laughed together at passerbys. We held hands. When the tea was gone, we returned to bed. Well, the reality was nothing like that. I woke abruptly to the sound of a cat wailing. It took a few moments to understand that the wailing was inside the flat, not outside in the park. My body was sore with its unaccustomed exercise. Ooh! And every part of me felt as gummy as your mouth does if you go to bed without brushing. I wanted a shower, a toothbrush, clean sheets, and more sleep, but the squalling was persistent. I felt Shadow in bed beside me, not a muscle moving. So I got up, found my fleece robe on the floor beside the bed, and wrapped it around me. All the while the wailing continued intermittently. The last wail came from the living room, followed by a crash and clatter. I keep table dressings in the front closet, candles and candle holders, napkins, placemats, tablecloths, some extra blankets for the guest bed were higher up. Now, at least half of the stuff I had been pulled. Oh, okay, there we go. Now at least half the stuff had been pulled onto the floor below the shelves, and Delilah was arranging the pile with her teeth and paws. I called Dr. Perry. She's making a birthing nest, the veterinarian said. Has she passed water? I looked. As if on cue, a puddle began to spread beneath her, tinged with pink. She's passing it now on a damask tablecloth Amelia gave me for Christmas a couple of years ago, I said anxiously. I think there might be blood. I'd better bring her over. Don't even think of it, Dr. Perry said. You can't disturb a cat while she's queening. I'll be right over. You'll come here? I said. I didn't know you made house calls. I don't, she said. This is a personal favor to my old friend Shadow, uh, for which you will make a sizable contribution to the shelter of your choice. You've got it, I said, as Delilah began to rock and whine. When I got off the phone, I heard Shadow in the shower. I pushed the door open and fetched some old towels and sheets, shouting the news over the rushing water. When I got back to the birthing closet, Delilah was still arranging the linens. I surreptitiously dropped an old towel in the corner and was grateful when she added it to her pile. Another towel and a sheet were offered and accepted in the same way. When I tried to actually help arrange the linens, though, I got a swat, claws out to discourage me. However, I did manage to rescue a few candles and a pewter candelabra that might cause injury if left in place. Just as Delilah seemed to be settling down, Dr. Perry arrived. Delilah's fresh veil was longer and more tonally complex than the others. It sounds like it's going to move pretty quickly, Dr. Perry said. And indeed, it did. That one, Dr. Perry said, in a little more than 10 minutes. I looked past her into the nest of linens. At first it looked like a gray blob, but then I saw the shape inside. It can't breathe, I said. Do something. Dr. Perry put a restraining hand on my leg. Delilah will take care of it. Watch. And as I looked, Delilah licked the goo off her newborn kitten, with relish, as though it were ice cream, and chocolate at that. The kitten struggled onto its legs and fell. It mewed. In the next 20 minutes, 2 more little blobs were born, one with black patches and another with Delilah's coloring. Delilah cleaned each one with the same careful attention, then collapsed on her side and slept. The new kittens quickly found their way to her belly, and after a bit of nuzzling and sibling rivalry, settled in for their first meal. We'll wait until they're finished feeding, and then I'll have a closer look, Dr. Perry said, her eyes glittering with happy tears. This was fun. I insist that all my clients neuter their cats early, so I haven't had a chance to see this in quite a while. Are you going to keep them all, or would you like me to see if I can find them homes? Keep them, I said, but I was simply reviewing the possibilities. She turned to me, and I saw surprise register on her face, then a teasing smile. I thought we could all use some tea and toast, Shadow was saying. Dr. Perry's eyes found mine, and all but winked at as his footsteps crossed the room to us. Thanks, Shadow, I said, without thinking. Dr. Perry hadn't missed my slip. Before I could think of an explanation, I felt Shadow's hand on my shoulder. She calls me that, he said, and I know how much she loved him, so I don't mind. You knew Shadow then? Dr. Perry said. Oh, yes, very well, Shadow said, without the trace of a smile. We all loved Shadow, Dr. Perry said. I'm still so tired of the word said. I suppose he was my favorite cat, although I try not to have any. He was a wonderful cat. He'll certainly live in our memories. I can understand how much you must miss him. And then some happy idea spread across her face. She turned to the birthing nest, and when she stood up again, she had one of the kittens in her hand. It fit perfectly in the cup of her palm, its tail dangling between her fingers. It was gray, with just a touch of white here and there. Actually, it barely looked like a cat, the fur still damp, the ears plastered to the head, the eyes squeezed shut. Don't worry about the eyes, Dr. Perry said. They'll open in a few days. I reached out a finger and rubbed its head. It's female, Dr. Perry said. But she looks so much like Shadow. He could be her sire. I gasped. But he couldn't. He was... I suppose, she said. But to be honest, I never looked. Thinking of her as carrying his genes might be comfort to you now, though. If you keep only one, this should be yours. She held out her hand, clearly inviting me to take the kitten, but I was still stuck on that last question. Can't be, I said, looking up at Shadow.